Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump were once asked the same question in an interview.
Let's say you become the president. When you leave office, in one word, what would you like your legacy to be?
And while the man who became president and has since been responsible for poisoning, torturing, and killing more innocent animals than any criminal in recent human history, quickly responded with the word
victory.
Bernie actually thought about his answer for a second before saying
Compassion.
He said it, not me.
Now, I've been meaning to make a video about why Bernie Sanders needs to stop eating animals ever since 2016.
Or rather, why Bernie, like most animal lovers in the world, is already vegan at heart and mind and just needs to follow up on it by eating delicious food on a daily basis that just happens to be made out of life-saving plants instead of dead animals.
But Bernie Sanders recently had a heart attack, and that has made this into a sort of personal emergency that affects the whole planet. Because Bernie is one of the only two candidates, alongside Joe Biden, who has a realistic chance of defeating Donald Trump in the battleground states where the future of America, and to a very large degree, the future of the world, is going to be decided. But before I say what I'm about to say to Bernie Sanders, let me just clarify that everything I'm about to say doesn't just apply to him, but also to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, to Bernie's lyrical spokesman and one of my favorite rappers, Killer Mike, and to anyone who considers himself a progressive or lefty, or just a nice person who cares about other people anywhere on the planet. Yeah, it's more like it.
And I want to emphasize that I said cares about people, not cares about animals. I think it goes without saying that anyone who cares about and loves animals hopefully wouldn't exploit and pay other people to kill animals when not only is it not necessary, but quite the opposite. It's actually crucial for human survival, particularly from heart attacks, and especially from these escalating climate disasters, to not eat dead animals and their bodily fluids. Plus, Bernie, it really seems like animals already love you, so...
Now you see, this little bird doesn't know it. Oh,
So first of all, how does our decision to eat or not to eat animals affect the well-being and survival of our fellow humans? There's actually three major ways, but first I want to start off by explaining how it contributes to the #1 human rights crisis on Earth. The fact that 9 million people will starve to death in 2020, all while we instead fatten up 65 billion farm animals for the slaughter each year.
And the reason that animal consumption is a primary cause of world hunger is the same reason that animal consumption is a primary cause of the climate emergency and the #1 cause of habitat destruction and mass extinction. It's just an extremely wasteful and inefficient way to grow food.
Because eating animals means eating all of the plants that it took to feed those animals, it means using up to 18 times more land to grow the same amount of calories or protein, with a small difference.
huge difference. Huge? Huge.
Okay, a huge difference that plant-based proteins are loaded with antioxidants that help prevent cancer and slow down the aging process, while dead animal flesh is loaded with carcinogens, free radicals, and cholesterol that accelerate biological aging, choke blood flow to the heart and penis, and promote the growth of tumors within your body. Cholesterol also does not exist in plants, which is one of the reasons that vegans have drastically lower rates of heart disease, and why some cardiologists are calling a whole foods plant-based diet, essentially unprocessed vegan food without added oil, the heart attack proof diet. Something I think we all wish Bernie Sanders would start eating immediately.
And I really hope that the people who love Bernie Sanders tag him here and tag their friends who love Bernie and do everything we can to get this message to him. Because about 1 in 5 people who have a heart attack will have a second heart attack within 5 years, which can often be lethal, which for Bernie means a very serious chance of losing him to heart disease for his entire potential first term as president.
On the flip side, not only are plant-based foods tied to increased physical performance, as so many professional athletes are now experiencing, but for the same basic reason that plants improve blood flow to the end. They are also tied to improved mental function, and specifically have been shown in Harvard research to slow cognitive decline, which is particularly important for our elders like Bernie, who at the age of 78 faces a marathon ahead on the campaign trail, and if he's successful in this epic battle, it means he's going to have won himself the most stressful job on earth. Bernie, you're gonna need that plant-based power. Call me up, I'll meet you for lunch, we'll have a feast. And completely aside from Bernie Sanders, and completely aside from politics, if this message could get through to just 1% of Bernie's 20 million followers on social media and inspire them to eat from the garden and not from the graveyard, as we say, over the course of the next year, we could prevent the release of approximately 1.4 billion pounds of greenhouse gases.
It's the methane.
Prevent the destruction of about 2.1 billion square feet of forest, save 80 billion gallons of water, and save the lives of approximately 73 million animals.
So please light up the comment section and tag all your friends who like Bernie while you watch this. Hashtag save the burn.
But because this all came up because we were talking about world hunger, consider that if just 1% of Bernie's supporters went vegan, it would free up about 2.9 billion pounds of food that could then be used to save the lives of starving people. So please keep that in mind the next time you use the privilege in your wallet to demand that so much land be wasted to create dead animal flesh instead of plant-based meat or alternatives. People like Bernie and his supporters, who often rightfully point out that
Almost all of the wealth and much of the income is going to the top 1%.
should consider the fact that 82% of starving children live in countries that are exporting dead animals to be consumed by privileged people in the West. We're exporting grain to be fed to the 99% of animals in America who are imprisoned in factory farms. And that's all while plant-based meat has become available literally everywhere in America right now. And that leads me to telling you about some good news for a change.
But first, because I've been talking about some pretty heavy topics so far, I want to lighten things up for a second and invite you to see if you could spot all the cats in this picture. Good job. Okay, here's the good news.
Despite what Fox News may have you believing, terrorism, illegal immigration, and a democratic socialist trying to get everybody health care are not the biggest threats to American life. The #1 cause of death in America, killing over 647,000 people a year, which is more than the entire population of Bernie's home state of Vermont, is heart disease, which is completely preventable outside of a few rare cases. For context, that's more than the number of American troops killed in combat in Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, the Gulf War, Vietnam, all of World War II, World War I, the Civil War, the War of 1812, and the Revolutionary War of Independence combined. And that's every single year in America, and that doesn't even include all the deaths from cancer and type 2 diabetes that are caused by the consumption of animal carcasses. And all of those hospital visits cost taxpayers to the tune of $219 billion a year, taken from every one of our paychecks. And all that money wasted, and all those deaths could be prevented simply by not eating dead animals and their bodily fluids, and keeping oily foods to a minimum if you're at risk of heart disease.
Bernie, imagine how many billions of dollars cheaper, and therefore realistic to implement, your Medicare for All plan would become if you inspired millions of your American fans to embody that compassion that you say you want to be your legacy. There's no better way for you to lead that change than to lead by example. Maybe save your own life in the process. Hashtag save the burn.
I know it doesn't look like it, but that bird is really a dove asking us for world peace. No more wars.
No more war indeed. But with all due respect, I don't know what other word could be used to describe what we are doing when we are slaughtering 3,000 animals a second on land alone, ripping uncountable numbers of living creatures out of the oceans every day, and literally burning down the Earth's left lung at a rate of 3 football fields a minute. All just for the cancerous version of a hamburger when the cruelty-free alternatives are right in front of you. And the climate disasters that are caused in part by all that destruction are contributing to actual shooting and bombing wars currently raging, like the civil war in Syria, the chaos and the rise of terrorism in Somalia, along with water shortages that already help contribute to the genocide in Darfur. And if you really care about humans, please keep in mind that the people who work in slaughterhouses, spending 8+ hours a day shooting animals in the head, slitting their throats, and chopping up their dead bodies so that rich people don't have to see any blood when they eat, are not only some of the most frequently injured and maimed workers in the country, but the PTSD that working a job of murdering animals all day causes has also been shown to increase rates of violent crime, domestic abuse, and even rape in surrounding communities, who are very often poor, underprivileged people that progressives claim to care so much about. And for the record, despite whatever overpriced specialty items you may have seen at Whole Foods, plant-based foods are cheaper than animal-based foods, which is why throughout the world and throughout history, poor people, or in the case of the Roman gladiators, slaves, have generally subsisted on things like oats, barley, rice, and beans, while only kings and rich people would eat things like cows, lambs, in some cases even humans, on a regular basis. So please don't use money as an excuse to keep exploiting animals. If money was really an issue, you'd already be vegan. Now, what would happen politically if Bernie Sanders decided to go vegan? Well, one thing I can tell you about the V gang is that anytime a celebrity decides to go vegan, we tend to go apeshit. And Bernie Sanders would be no exception. And with 6% of the US population currently being vegan, or approximately 20 million people, I can guarantee you that not all those people are registered to vote in the primaries. And what you can see is going to be a very close battle for the Democratic nomination and the White House. Mobilizing American vegans in support of Bernie could absolutely tip the balance in many closely fought battles. Just saying. But on that note, I just want to mention to all my fellow Bernie supporters and all my fellow vegans who are watching, if Bernie doesn't win the primaries, we must absolutely support Joe Biden, support Pete Buttigieg, or whomever wins the Democratic nomination. That's because anyone who's actually paying attention to the facts can see that there is a mass extinction of a difference between Republican and Democratic actions. And I don't want you to take my word for it. I want all you people who've been repeating the myth that all politicians are the same because you haven't been paying any attention to actually look at the mountain of evidence that I'm presenting here. Because like I said at the Animal Rights Music Festival in Brooklyn a while back,
but like I was hearing people say, I don't see what kind of difference voting for him's gonna make anyways. Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me give you one example. On just one day, with one stroke of the pen, the last legitimately elected president of the United States, Barack Obama, created a marine sanctuary in the Pacific Ocean the size of Texas, California, New York State, Florida, Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Jersey combined. And because he banned oil extraction, mining, and industrial fishing inside the sanctuary, it is no exaggeration to say that one single act saved the lives of billions of animals, including endangered whales and dolphins, and species we haven't even discovered yet and didn't even know existed. And that was just one single signature, but it was part of democratic actions that led to the protection of earth and ocean, and all the wild animals that live within them, equivalent to the size of all of Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Sweden, and the United Kingdom combined. And that's on top of hundreds of other actions, like making the biggest cuts in cancer-causing, birth defect-causing, climate-destroying, mass extinction-inducing greenhouse gases and toxic air pollution in human history. Truly monumental progress that orange moron is working on murdering every single day that criminal still lives in the White House. And Mike Pence will be no different. But both political parties are the same, right?
there were enough Green Party voters in the year 2000 to have made Al Gore president. Al Gore. And enough in 2016 to have prevented Agent Orange from winning the Electoral College. Please do not repeat these unnatural disasters. By all means, just because Democrats are astronomically better than Republicans, don't settle for them the way they are. Keep pushing Democrats to be more progressive on all these issues.
And if you are going to get involved in a blue team, bring Beyond Burgers to their barbecues. Bring vegan cookies to their meetings. I haven't spoken to anyone who is progressive, who had anything against veganism. Most of them are very interested. A lot of them seem frankly embarrassed that they still eat animals. So help them. Share the recipes, the documentaries, etc. There is literally no better place that you could possibly be doing vegan outreach and kill two birds with, whoa. Feed two birds with one stone. There's already enough of us in this country, in every swing state, that if we took enough time to vote, as we do to choose a damn filter on Instagram, the Republicans would never win the White House again, as long as they stand for brutality and cruelty towards the innocent. And if we are the reason that Democrats keep winning over and over again, you best believe our voices will matter in government, just like they already do out in California, where vegan Democrats are on the verge of outlawing animal experimentation for cosmetics. Or right here in Brooklyn, where the borough president, a vegan Democrat, is bringing plant-based education and plant-based meals into our schools. And in 3 cities out in Cali now, Democratic councils have succeeded in outlawing the bloody fucking fur industry, and we're just getting started.
Now, how would Bernie going vegan affect his chances of him actually winning the White House? Aside from, surviving until then. As far as what right-wing extremists are going to say about you, I mean, they say crazy shit regardless, so you can't really live your life based around what Fox News is going to say about you.
Socialist Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez teaming up yet again to push their left-wing agenda. This time they're demanding that the government declare climate change a national emergency. And they're calling for a massive mobilization of federal resources to deal with it. Here's Bernie Sanders ramping up the climate hysteria with this comparison.
As far as with non-right-wing extremists, just as is the case with all the vegan celebrities in the world, no one seems to really care when someone goes vegan, except for vegans. And if Bernie were to go vegan, it doesn't mean he's about to try and force everyone to stop eating animals. Nor could he, even if he were president. Nor would he obviously ever win the presidency if he was proposing that. But with 2/3 of Americans already desiring to reduce their animal consumption, there's no reason that most reasonable Americans wouldn't look up to you. It's just you setting a good example. The same way I hope your campaign rents electric cars if possible whenever you're on the road. The difference is that not every rental company has electric cars yet. Whereas in the year 2020, vegan food is absolutely everywhere. And there's lots of awesome options for healthy snacks that you could bring with you on a bus or a plane when you're on the road. They're great. You can also feed 2 birds with 1 scone, as we say, and improve the effectiveness of the Green New Deal if you incorporate a plan to help struggling dairy farmers get out of a dying industry and into cruelty-free plant-based alternatives. Right now, the temptation from politicians is just to bail out and keep subsidizing the dairy industry, even though fewer and fewer people are drinking baby cow's milk every year, as people wake up to the negative health effects, the environmental damage, and the extreme animal cruelty involved. So rather than trying to move in the wrong direction and keep the bad old days alive like Trump is trying to do with coal, you could offer assistance to those farmers to use their land to grow things like oats, soybeans, almond trees, and other ingredients for the murder-free alternatives to cow's milk. The beautiful thing here is that because plant-based food requires so much less space than cow's milk, there will be an enormous amount of land freed up that the farmers no longer need. So the farmer can either sell that land, make a bunch of extra money, or, and I think this is the most perfect solution, a President Bernie Sanders administration could simultaneously help those farmers by allocating some of the money that you were going to spend anyway on addressing the climate emergency to buying that land from them and allowing it to regenerate into nature. Roosevelt's original New Deal actually involved a conservation corps that was involved in tree planting and reforestation. So it's a no-brainer that the Green New Deal should also aim to create jobs in that same field. Just for context, a worldwide shift from animal to plant-based foods would free up 75% of all the space currently being taken up by the human race to regenerate into nature. That's the equivalent to the land area of the entire United States and China and Australia and the European Union combined. The rebirth of that many forests, savannas, wetlands, and prairies wouldn't just be a miracle for endangered species who are currently headed for extinction. It would be a miracle for our species, particularly American people, millions of whom live in the 40+ cities that will be partially or fully under the ocean by the end of the century if we don't stop the burning and melting of our planet. And on a personal note, because both of us lost a lot of family members in the Nazi Holocaust, and I really identify with what you said about the fact that learning about that genocide as a child, even from here in North America, influenced your politics heavily and influenced who you became as an adult. So I just want to quote an actual Holocaust survivor by the name of Dr. Alex Hershaft, explaining his reaction when his job as a scientist studying water pollution brought him inside a slaughterhouse for the first time.
My first reaction was to recoil in horror, as most people would. But very quickly, I made the association with the piles of body parts I saw in Auschwitz. The use of cattle cars to transport people to the gas chambers. the crowding in wood containers of the victims, the arbitrary designation of who lives and who dies. And this is when I resolved to devote the rest of my life to fighting the oppression of animals raised for food.
And he later became one of the founders of the modern animal rights movement. Personally, I'll never forget the first time I went to a vigil with the Animal Save movement and seeing a truck full of cows, probably not much more than a year old, about to be brutally shot and stabbed to death just for the crime of being born the wrong species of animal. Just like our family members were murdered for being the wrong race of human. An innocent animal who just wants to live and be with their family and best friends, just like we do. Reduced to a number on his ear tag, just like my grandfather was reduced to a number tattooed on his arm when he was a slave in Auschwitz. And we like to think our species has become more civilized since the Holocaust ended, and yet there are gas chambers in nearly every major American city. Among the methods used to murder 6 million animals every 4 hours, 25 million animals a day in just the United States alone, who in the case of pigs are just as intelligent and just as innocent as a 3-year-old human child. I know you have a strong sense of justice, Bernie. I know that you always stand with the oppressed and that you have a good heart. Well, right now your heart needs you to stop eating animals as urgently as the animals do. This isn't just about your health anymore, Bernie. The world needs you to be healthy and be strong, to stand up to Donald, there were very fine people at a Nazi rally Trump right now, because his policies are absolutely causing mass suffering and mass murder in the animal kingdom and human race alike. If you'd like to get more involved in activism and shutting down the slaughterhouses in your own city, you can follow the Animal Save movement on Instagram or whatever your favorite social media is, and find your local chapter at thesavemovement.org. If you'd like to share this video on Instagram, just send me a direct message at Gaia's Eye and I will send it straight to you. Now let's get this message to Uncle Bernie and to good-hearted people all around the world. Thank you.